A millionaire is taken by surprise at the airport when a little girl runs toward him, her eyes filled with tears, and asks, "Daddy, why did you leave us?" The man stands frozen, not knowing how to handle the situation. Fernando, a man whose life had been marked by great achievements, stepped off the plane into the crowded airport. The atmosphere was chaotic, with people hurrying back and forth, dragging luggage, saying goodbyes, or reuniting with loved ones. The sound of voices and announcements echoed through the halls, but for Fernando, it all seemed distant, muffled. He walked slowly, carrying a small leather suitcase, a sharp contrast to his impeccable appearance and expensive suit. His gaze was distant, cold, as if he were in another world. Despite his well-groomed face and flawless posture, the signs of fatigue were there, hidden behind his success. The years away from home had given him everything money could buy: wealth, prestige, power. But deep down, Fernando knew he had lost something essential along the way. As he crossed the airport lobby, his eyes fixed on the large glass panels, watching the bustling scene outside. Cars came and went, families hugged, smiles lit up with warm reunions. But he didn't feel the same joy. Inside, he felt a vast emptiness. It was as if something crucial was missing from his life, something he could no longer clearly define. The man who had often made headlines in business magazines, who knew market numbers by heart, who frequented the most exclusive venues in the world, was now returning to his hometown. Yet, this return was not a celebration, not a glorious new beginning. It was a visit forced by time and circumstances, a visit he feared but knew was inevitable. Fernando felt the weight of every step. Even surrounded by dozens of people, he was completely alone. That airport, where so many found joy, was for him merely a place of passage. His unchanging expression reflected the image of a man accustomed to hiding emotions, trained to be rational, efficient, and above all, unshakable. But as he walked toward the exit, something inside him stirred. Perhaps it was the familiarity of the place, the memories of moments left behind. The ground he walked on was no longer the same, and neither was he the same man who left years ago. Even with all his wealth and status, Fernando knew the city held a part of his story he couldn't erase, a part that defined him far more than any million-dollar contract he had signed. He sighed, feeling the tension built up in his shoulders, and glanced at his gold wristwatch. Everything about him screamed success: the clothes, the car waiting outside, the way he carried himself. But none of it could fill the emptiness spreading through his chest. He was back, but he didn't know if he was truly welcome. Not by everyone. Fernando had left behind much more than memories. He had abandoned people, relationships, moments that would never return. Now, as he passed through the automatic doors, he felt the fresh air of the city he once called home. And in that moment, even surrounded by strangers, he realized something. The city seemed to have moved on without him. And for the first time in a long while, Fernando allowed himself a fraction of vulnerability. Because, although he had everything he had ever wanted materially, he was missing something essential, a true connection. And that realization would follow him, like a shadow, for the duration of his stay. The millionaire was back, but the question he couldn't shake was, for what? What did he expect to find after all he had left behind? As Fernando walked through the airport, surrounded by luggage spinning on carousels and families reuniting, he couldn't escape the memories that began to surface. Each step echoed the past he had left behind, like a movie that wouldn't stop playing in his mind. The lively environment around him stood in stark contrast to the silence he felt within. And in that silence, the past found a way to break in. He vividly remembered the day he decided to leave. It had been a tough choice, but in his eyes, a necessary one. His ambition was insatiable, and he felt that staying trapped in a common life in his hometown would prevent him from reaching what he believed was his true destiny. Yet, with that decision, he had left behind something far greater. The most painful moment resurfaced with crystal clarity. The day his young daughter Sophia, only 3 at the time, clung to his arm as he tried to leave. His suitcase was already in the car, the taxi waiting outside. He knelt beside her, his eyes filling with tears, but he held firm. Sophia, with her rosy cheeks and wide, sparkling eyes, asked in her soft voice, "Are you coming back tomorrow, Daddy?" That question cut through him like a knife. He couldn't answer right away. He knew he wouldn't be back the next day, or the days after. In truth, he knew his departure meant a separation longer than any child could understand. But he forced himself to smile. "Soon, my love. Soon." The lie echoed in his mind now, so many years later. When he stood up to leave that day, Sophia's tiny body clung to his leg, begging him not to go. Her desperate crying remained imprinted in his memory, an image he could never erase. Even after he got into the taxi, Sophia's tears continued to ring in his ears. And still today, more than a decade later, that sound persisted, haunting him in quiet moments. His wife Anna had watched from the door that day, her expression a mix of sadness and acceptance. They had argued about the decision, of course. Anna had always been more attached to the idea of family, stability, and home. For her, success was about being present, sharing the small, important moments of life. But Fernando had other plans. He had promised to make the sacrifice worthwhile, that he'd come back with the means to give their family a better, more comfortable, safer life. "I did what I had to do," he murmured to himself whenever these memories surfaced, trying to convince his heart of something his mind had long since accepted. Looking around the airport, Fernando noticed how connected people seemed. Parents hugging children, couples laughing together, friends reuniting. Each scene, every gesture of affection reminded him of what he had lost, moments that money couldn't buy. He had traded emotional closeness for material success. He tried once again to justify it to himself. It was the right thing, he thought, as he had so many times over the years. "I did it for them, for our family." But the truth he avoided facing was that the success he had achieved never filled the emptiness he felt since he left Sofia and Anna behind. Fernando knew his choices had shaped the man he was today. A successful man, yes, but also a solitary one, surrounded by achievements that now seemed worthless in the face of missing out on the simplest, most meaningful moments of life. He was back in the city that held these memories, but he also knew that the ghosts he carried were harder to confront than any professional challenge. Sophia's smile, her laughter, the moments he missed, all of it now seemed to demand a far greater price than he had ever imagined. As he walked through the airport, these memories weighing on his shoulders, Fernando realized something unsettling. He was no longer the same man who had left, but perhaps what he had left behind was no longer waiting for him in the same way either. As Fernando walked, lost in memories of the past, a soft voice pulled him back to the present. "Daddy." The word echoed inside him like thunder, freezing him in place. His heart raced, and for a moment, he wondered if he'd imagined it. But as he slowly turned, time seemed to stand still. Just a few feet away stood a little girl, around 8 years old, with wavy brown hair that swayed softly with the breeze from the airport's automatic doors. Her large eyes, bright and filled with curiosity and a hint of confusion, were fixed on him. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same eyes, the same furrowed brow when focused. Fernando felt a tightness in his chest. He knew who she was, even before a single word was spoken. Sofia. His daughter. The little girl he'd left years ago, crying and begging him to stay. The one he'd watched grow only through pictures and sparse phone calls. Now, here she was, standing before him, much older than he remembered. The time he'd lost was embodied in this child. His mind raced with a whirlwind of thoughts. What should he say? How could he explain the years of silence? But before he could react, his eyes shifted to the woman standing beside the girl. Anna. His heart skipped a beat. Anna, his ex-wife, stood there motionless, watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. She had aged a bit, but she still carried the same calm he had once admired so much. Her eyes, however, told a story of unspoken hurts, broken promises, and years without answers. Fernando felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. There was his daughter, the one he had missed seeing grow. And beside her, the woman he had loved but left behind in his pursuit of success. The past he had tried so hard to escape had finally caught up with him. And he was unprepared. Sofia took a small step forward, her eyes still fixed on him, and softly repeated, "Daddy." The word, though simple, held years of pain and unanswered questions. The world around them seemed to vanish. People rushed by, suitcases rolling, conversations buzzing, filling the space. But for Fernando, the world had shrunk to this single moment, this small voice. He tried to open his mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain everything that had happened? How could he justify his absence, his silence? The guilt he had tried to bury for so long was now standing before him, embodied in a child who simply wanted to know why her father had vanished from her life. Anna took a step forward, breaking the tense silence. She looked at Fernando, and he could see that, despite everything, there was a certain peace in her eyes, as if she had known this moment would come. Without breaking eye contact, She placed a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder and in a firm but restrained voice said, "She knows who you are." Fernando felt his knees weaken for a second. There was no more running. The encounter he had dreaded for so long had finally happened. And now, more than ever, he would have to face the consequences of his choices. Sophia's question lingered in the air, as if time itself had stopped. "Why did you leave us?" The simplicity of her words, devoid of anger but full of pain and innocence, pierced Fernando like a sharp blade. He stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. All the years of success, all the wealth he'd accumulated, none of it had prepared him for this moment. Deep down, he had always known this day would come, but he never imagined that the words of a little girl could dismantle him so completely. He looked at Sophia, who was still watching him with her wide eyes, waiting for an answer. For her, time hadn't healed his absence, it had only deepened the wound. Her question wasn't just about the past, it was about the present. It was about the emptiness she felt growing up without him, about the nights she and her mother were left alone, with no word or explanation. Fernando tried to speak, but his voice faltered. He felt crushed by guilt, by years of selfish choices, by the excuses he'd always told himself to stay away. He had convinced himself that he was doing the best thing for them by building a stable financial life. But now, facing his daughter, all of it seemed meaningless. He lowered himself to Sophia's level, trying to connect with her, trying to convey something he could barely understand himself. "Sophia, I'm so sorry." The words came out shaky but genuine. He extended his hand hesitant, hoping she would take it, but the little girl remained still, her gaze steady on him, unmoving. "I left because..." He stopped, swallowing hard. How could he explain? How could he justify something that, in a child's eyes, was unforgivable? He glanced briefly at Anna, who remained silent, watching the scene with a neutral expression. She wouldn't step in. This was Fernando's moment. He needed to face the consequences. "I thought I was doing the right thing," Fernando continued, his voice strained. "I thought that if I worked hard, if I built a successful life, I could give you and your mother everything you needed. I thought I was sacrificing my time for something bigger. But now I see I was wrong." Sophia blinked slowly, still processing his words. To her, it didn't make sense yet. She didn't want the money, or the occasional gifts he sent on special occasions. What she wanted was his presence, something he'd never offered. And at that moment, Fernando finally understood that. "But you left us, alone," Sophia said softly, almost in a whisper. "You promised you'd come back." It was the same promise that had echoed in her mind for years, ever since he made it at the gate the day he left. Those words cut even deeper. A broken promise. An unkept commitment. Fernando realized there were no easy answers. He had made choices that placed ambition before love, and now he was paying the price. He felt tears start to form, something he rarely allowed himself. "I know, Sophia. I know I messed up." For a moment, the silence between them felt unbearable. Anna stepped forward, sensing that the weight of the moment was too much for a child to bear alone. She placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder, but the girl's gaze didn't leave Fernando. "Do you still love us?" Sophia asked, her voice breaking the final barrier that had separated father and daughter. Fernando was paralyzed, as if the weight of all his choices had suddenly fallen onto his shoulders. Everything he had built, his brilliant career, his successful empire, his countless achievements, felt insignificant in that moment. Sophia's eyes, filled with innocence yet carrying a deep sadness, only intensified the emptiness he was desperately trying to ignore, especially with Anna's silent presence beside her, calm but resolute. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The words he had once believed would explain everything, his sacrifices, his absence, now felt hollow. What could he possibly say? That he had spent years trying to build a better life for them? That he thought his success would make up for all the time he spent away? Those justifications, which once seemed reasonable, now felt meaningless in the face of the pain he saw in his daughter's eyes. Fernando looked down, trying to find some strength within himself. The silence around him was suffocating. The busy airport, with people rushing by with their suitcases, seemed distant, like it was happening in another reality. In that small circle shared with Sophia and Anna, only the consequences of his decisions mattered. He raised his eyes again, meeting Anna's gaze for a brief moment. She said nothing, but her look conveyed a clear message. It was time for Fernando to face the truth, to stop hiding behind excuses and finally take responsibility for his actions. There was no more running away. I tried to do the right thing, Fernando began, his voice trembling. I thought success would bring us everything we needed. That if I worked hard enough, you would have a better life. But as he spoke, he realized how empty those words sounded. He tasted the bitter reality hitting hard. No amount of money or success could erase the years of absence, the emptiness he had left in Sofia. Sofia continued to look at him, now with a more serious expression. She was young, but she clearly understood that something was deeply wrong. She didn't need long explanations or justifications. What she needed was a father who was there, and Fernando had not been that father. And what about us? Where were we in that better life? Sofia's voice broke the silence, direct and filled with wisdom far beyond her years. Fernando felt each word piercing his soul. There was no escaping that truth. The success he had so tirelessly pursued had cost him what mattered most, his family. Ana, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. Fernando, no one can deny you worked hard. But what Sofia is trying to say, what I've tried to show you for so many years, is that success without love, without presence, has no value. Her words echoed in his heart, revealing a truth he had ignored for so long. Fernando took a deep breath, feeling the reality of his choices finally sinking in. All the success in the world, all the wealth he had accumulated, couldn't fill the void his absence had left in Sofia's life. He was not just standing in front of his daughter and his ex-wife. He was facing the harshest reflection of himself, a man who had traded love for ambition and was now paying the price. I know I messed up, he said, almost in a whisper, the words coming out painfully. If I could go back, I would do everything differently. But Fernando knew that wasn't possible. What he needed now was to find a way to repair the present, to regain Sofia's love and trust. Her gaze stayed on him, but now there was something else, a small opening. The confrontation with reality had been painful, but it was also the beginning of something new. Fernando realized that this moment, though filled with pain, was his chance to change, to be the father Sofia deserved, even if it was a long time coming. Ana took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure as she leaned slightly toward Sofia. Her fingers gently touched her daughter's shoulder, a gesture of protection and support. She knew this moment was delicate, both for little Sofia and for Fernando. Ana had prepared for this eventuality for years, but nothing could have truly prepared her for the reunion. In a controlled voice, yet laden with repressed emotions, Ana addressed her daughter. Sofia, she began, carefully choosing her words. This is your father. The man I used to tell you about. He left when you were very young, but not because he didn't love you. Things were complicated. As she spoke, Ana struggled to keep her composure. Every word brought back memories she had long tried to bury. Fernando remained silent, listening intently but feeling each word like a blow. He knew Anna's explanation would be painful, but necessary. And there, in front of them, there was no escaping the truths of the past. Despite her calm exterior, Ana was reliving all the pain that Fernando had caused, and it was clear on her face, even though she tried not to show it. Your father made choices that pulled him away from us, Ana continued, her voice now more firm, though emotions were visible in her eyes. He decided to follow a path that took him far from us. But that doesn't mean he didn't think about you. As she said this, Ana shot a quick glance at Fernando, as if silently asking whether he truly thought about Sofia all that time. The unspoken question lingered in the air, making Fernando feel even more uncomfortable. For Ana, the moment was an emotional roller coaster. There was anger, of course. But over time, that anger had been muffled, replaced by the need to move on, to raise Sofia alone, to build a life without Fernando. However, seeing him there, beside the daughter he had left behind, reignited a whirlwind of feelings Ana thought she had buried forever. She had convinced herself that she no longer needed him, that the hurt had been overcome. But now here, everything was rushing back. She looked at Sofia, who was watching everything with her large, attentive eyes, absorbing every word, trying to grasp the complexity of the situation. For Sofia, her father was a distant figure, almost mythical. The stories Ana had told over the years were careful, avoiding harsh judgments but also making it clear that Fernando had chosen not to be present. And now, faced with reality, Sofia seemed confused, caught between curiosity and hurt. I tried to do my best, Sofia, Ana said, her voice trembling slightly, though she quickly regained control. You are my world, and I did everything I could to make sure you grew up surrounded by love, even without him around. Fernando closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of every one of those words. He had always known Anna was strong, but now, seeing her face to face, he understood the magnitude of everything she had endured. The tension between past and present was palpable. Anna wasn't there to judge, but it was impossible to ignore the years of abandonment, the lonely nights, the explanations she had to make up for Sophia when the girl asked why her father was never there. Yet, despite the pain, Anna knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was about Sophia. And as much as she wanted to protect her daughter from more hurt, she also knew Sophia needed to understand who Fernando was, with all his flaws and shortcomings. "I don't want you to hate your father," Anna said softly, almost in a whisper. "But I also want you to know the truth, to understand the choices he made and how they affected us." Fernando felt a chill run through him. Those words weighed heavily on him, reminding him that, despite his attempt to make amends, the road ahead would be long and painful. Sophia looked between the two of them, unsure of what to feel. The child within her wanted to run into her father's arms, but the recent pain of abandonment held her back. For her, the past and present were tangled in a confusing web of emotions. And Fernando, standing before this reality, knew he was at a crossroads. He could finally face his mistakes and try to rebuild his relationship with his daughter, or continue running from responsibility, as he had done for so long. Fernando slowly bent down, trying to meet Sophia's curious and innocent gaze. His heart pounded in his chest as he searched for the right words, fully aware that each phrase could either open a door or build an unbreakable barrier. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I really am," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "When I decided to leave, it wasn't because I didn't love you and your mom. I thought that if I worked hard enough, I could give you both a better life, with more opportunities." He paused, watching the expressions on his daughter's face. Her delicate, pure features made it hard to believe that someone so young could carry the pain of abandonment. Fernando tried, with all his might, to convey the sincerity of his regret. "I thought that by making money, by being successful, I could make sure you had everything you needed. But now, I see that I lost what truly matters." Sophia kept her eyes fixed on him, unmoved by the explanation he was trying to piece together. Her innocence cut through his words with a simple, direct question. "But what about our hugs, Daddy?" Her words echoed in the air, exposing the vulnerability of the moment. The question froze Fernando in place. He hesitated, realizing that this small moment of innocence challenged the logic of all his excuses. What could he say about the hugs that never happened? Those small acts of love that had been replaced by business commitments and meetings. What did he have to offer now, besides empty promises? I don't know, Sophia. I should have been there for you," he replied, his voice trembling under the weight of emotion. A hug is all I ever wanted to give you, but I was so lost in my pursuit of success that I left it all behind." Tears filled his eyes as he was haunted by the image of his little girl, waiting for him like a ghost from his past. Sophia's expression shifted from curiosity to sadness, reflecting the hurt she felt. "Didn't you want to hug me anymore?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. It was a simple question, but it carried an immense weight. Fernando felt a new kind of pain, not just guilt, but the realization that he had, in a way, left his little girl behind while chasing a life that could never replace moments of love and connection. "Never, Sophia. I always wanted to hug you. And I want that now, more than anything else," Fernando said, his sincerity evident in every word. He extended his arms in a nervous, hopeful gesture. Sophia hesitated for a moment, her emotions conflicted, but the desire to connect with her father was strong. Fernando stayed there, waiting, wanting her to know he was ready to change, to try to make things right. The space between them, once filled with pain and distance, now seemed to hold a new possibility. He didn't want Sophia to see an absent father. He wanted her to see a man willing to fight for her trust, someone who had finally understood the true value of hugs and simple moments. Then, Sophia took a hesitant step toward him. With a quick breath, she opened her arms and ran into Fernando's embrace, holding him in a shy but sincere hug. He held her tightly, feeling her warmth and fragility, his heart filling with a love he didn't know could exist after so many years of loneliness. In the middle of that bustling airport, time seemed to stop. Fernando finally felt the connection he had always longed for, the sense that, despite all the pains of the past, there was a chance to start over. The hug wouldn't erase the years of absence, but it was an important step, a first step toward reconciliation. He whispered in her ear, "I'm so sorry for everything, Sophia. I'm here now. I promise I won't leave you again." In that moment, The innocence of a child and a father's regret intertwined into a new story, one marked by scars but finding a path toward healing. Anna watched the scene with a mix of relief and anguish. Seeing Sophia in Fernando's arms, finally receiving the embrace she had longed for, brought warmth to her heart. Yet, at the same time, the sight rekindled a deep pain, reminding her of all she had lost and of what Fernando had left behind. The joy of the moment was quickly overshadowed by a flood of memories that swept over her like a storm. She stepped forward, her expression shifting from faint hope to resolute determination. "Fernando," she said, her voice firm but with a tremor betraying the emotions held back. "You need to understand that this reconciliation doesn't erase years of pain. I don't want you or Sophia to forget what happened." Sophia looked between the two, confusion once again filling her eyes, as Anna continued, determined. "Remember all the birthdays you missed. Sophia's first day of school, the moments that are gone forever. You weren't there when she took her first steps, but I was. I held her, I encouraged her. She needed you, and for some reason, you chose not to be there." Fernando felt the weight of Anna's words, each one hitting his conscience like a hammer. He recalled every birthday he hadn't celebrated, every important moment spent with people who meant little to him but weren't his daughter. Guilt began to tighten in his chest, and he was about to respond, but Anna didn't let him interrupt. "I'm not here to reopen old wounds," Anna continued, her voice faltering slightly as she mentioned Sophia's first steps. "But you need to understand that every step she took, every laugh you didn't hear, it all weighs on me, and more importantly on her." Sophia stood silent, her wide eyes processing her mother's words. The innocence of childhood was now tinged with a pain that was beginning to surface in her awareness. Anna turned to her daughter, trying to offer reassurance. "Sophia, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always be here for you. You are loved, and you were never alone, even when your father wasn't there." Fernando watched the interaction, feeling the truth in Anna's words. He wanted to argue, to explain that he had tried, that it had never been easy for him, but Anna's voice stopped him. It was the first time he clearly saw the pain his choices had caused. He wasn't just an absent father, he was a man who, in pursuit of a future, had sacrificed moments that would never come back. Anna continued, her gaze fixed on Fernando. "If you really want to win Sophia back, it won't be through promises alone. You need to show her day after day that you're here now, that you can be the father she deserves. But know that it won't be easy. The path is filled with memories we can't erase." Anna's words echoed in Fernando's mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being confronted by his darkest past. He knew Anna was right, yet there was still a place inside him, a spark of hope that could be rekindled, even in the face of the pain that was resurfacing. The tension in the air was palpable, and Sophia looked to Fernando, seeking an answer he might not yet have. Anna, noticing the confusion in her daughter, offered an encouraging smile but not before making sure Fernando understood the gravity of the situation. "This isn't just a moment. It's a journey. And if you're willing to commit, we'll be here for you. But you have to be real. You have to be honest." Fernando nodded, feeling the weight of her words, and for the first time, he felt that he could be honest not just with himself but with the two people he loved most in the world. He needed to decide if he was ready to face the consequences of his actions, and most importantly, if he was strong enough to build a new future. Fernando felt the weight of Anna's words echoing in his mind, like a truth that wouldn't stop repeating. Apologies weren't enough. In that moment, amidst the bustle of the airport, the pressure of the past and the intensity of the present merged, bringing him to a painful clarity. He realized that all the money he had earned, all the success he had achieved, could never fill the emptiness left by his absence in Sophia's life. As he looked into his daughter's eyes, now filled with a mixture of confusion and fragile hope, a lump formed in his throat. He was used to being seen as a conqueror, a man who had everything under control. But now, standing before Sophia and Anna, he felt truly vulnerable. This vulnerability, in turn, awakened in him a deep desire for change. "Sophia," he began, his voice barely a whisper, yet full of emotion. He knelt down again, this time closer to her, hoping to capture her attention. "I want you to know that I want to be in your life. I want to be the father you deserve." The words were hard to get out, but they were filled with sincerity. He looked into Sophia's eyes and saw not only the pain of abandonment but also a spark of hope. "I know it might seem too late, but I promise I'm going to try. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back," he said, feeling the tremor in his own voice. The simple act of opening up to Sophia lifted a weight off his shoulders. It was as if he were breaking free from the chains that had kept him bound to his own loneliness for years. Anna watched, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and caution. She wanted to believe Fernando's words, but she also knew that action spoke louder than any promise. "It's a start, Fernando," she said, trying to find a balance between the pain of the past and the possibility of a better future. "But it won't be easy. Trust takes time to rebuild." Fernando nodded, fully aware that the journey would be long and full of challenges. "I understand. I'm willing to go through it. I don't want to miss any more moments. I don't want to look back and regret anything." "Sophia, you mean everything to me. I'll do everything I can to be there for you, every step of the way." Sophia looked at him, confusion still visible on her face, but something started to shift. Her innocence was beginning to grasp that maybe there was a chance. She asked hesitantly, "So, are you going to stay? Forever?" The simple question was filled with hope and fear, and Fernando realized that this was a question he needed to answer with absolute sincerity. "Yes, I want to stay. I want to be part of your life, and I'll do everything to make sure you feel loved and safe. You deserve that." The firmness in his voice reflected a determination he had never felt before. It was as if he were being reborn in front of her, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Anna, noticing the change in Fernando's tone, felt that maybe, just maybe, there was a path to reconciliation. The pain was still there, but the desire for a better future began to replace the bitterness that had accompanied her. She decided it was time to give this new chapter a chance. "Then let's take this step together," Anna said, turning to Sophia. "Your life is filled with precious moments, and having your father by your side could be an important part of that." Sophia gave a timid smile, her eyes shining with new hope. She had felt the sincerity in her father's words and her mother's determination. Fernando, now with a lighter heart, made a silent promise to himself. He would not let them down again. As the three of them stood up, a new chapter began to unfold before them, and for the first time, Fernando felt ready to face the challenges ahead. The path to reconciliation would be long and full of obstacles, but the decision was made. He would choose to be present, not just physically but emotionally, and that would make all the difference. The airport environment, previously chaotic and full of sounds, now seemed like a universe apart, where everything had become secondary to what was happening. Fernando and Sophia were there, a father and his daughter, in a space where the barriers of the past were beginning to dissolve. The silence between them was filled with unspoken feelings, but also with a new understanding, an opening to what could be. Sophia looked at Fernando, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotion and expectation. He, in turn, felt his heart racing, aware that this moment was a turning point. Slowly, he approached hesitantly, as if he were crossing a minefield of memories and feelings. He wanted Sophia to feel that he was there for her, that he was ready to offer not only words, but love and affection. Then finally, Fernando crouched down a little more, to Sophia's height, and held out his arms. "Come here, my dear," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Sophia's gaze lit up with a gleam of recognition and hope. She hesitated for a brief moment, the weight of past pain weighing on her small shoulders, but the desire to connect with her father was stronger. And so, as if time had stopped, Sophia ran towards Fernando, and their arms intertwined in a shy but meaningful hug. It was a simple gesture, but full of depth. The child nestled into her chest, and Fernando felt her fragility and strength at the same time. It was a first step, a beginning of reconciliation that, although it did not solve everything, opened the door to something new and hopeful. Anna, watching from afar, felt a tear slide down her face. It was a tear of emotion and relief, an acknowledgement that, even after so many years of pain, there was still room for healing. She understood that the future was uncertain, but that moment, simple and pure, represented an opportunity that they all longed for. The wounds of the past would still be there, but now they could begin to be treated with love, understanding, and above all, with the willingness to reconnect. "This is just the beginning," Anna whispered to herself, feeling hope blossom within her. She knew the road would be long and there was much work ahead, but the possibility of a happier future, where Fernando could become a present father, was something she had never dared to imagine until that moment. As the two embraced, Anna approached and with a loving gesture, placed her hand on Sophia's head, joining in the embrace. It was a symbol of a new unity, a new family that, even marked by scars, was willing to heal. Anna's tears were now tears of hope, a sign that love and forgiveness could still find space in their hearts. In that brief moment, the chaos of the airport dissolved, and the outside world seemed irrelevant. What mattered was the connection that was being forged, a bond that, although fragile, was authentic and full of promise. Fernando realized that this embrace was not just an act of reconciliation, it was an invitation to transformation, a new beginning that would require patience and dedication. But for now, he was grateful just to be there present, and to have the chance to rewrite his family's story. As they walked away, with shy smiles and hopeful looks, Fernando knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but he was ready to face them. With Ana by his side and Sofia in his arms, he finally felt at home.